Welcome to the Sugar and Strength podcast. I'm your host, Kayla Girgen, and today I am super excited to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that is rucking. I'm assuming that being that you're here, you probably have a little bit of background on what rucking is, but if you're totally new to rucking, essentially rucking is walking with weight. And we are going to break that down a little bit further today. I have a ton of AMA questions or Ask Me Anything questions. If you're completely new to rucking, or if you are a seasoned rucker and you're maybe new to me or new to rucking, then be sure to grab my book, Ruck Fit, Build Strength and Endurance by Walking with Weight. Here, I will bring you through all of the benefits of rucking. I take you through the gear, what works best. We will talk a little bit about that today in terms of what's best, a weighted vest or a rucksack. I have training plans, nutrition protocols, all of that fun stuff. So if you're looking for a hands-on tactical resource, that is an excellent one for you. And it's available in paperback. It's also available in audio and ebook as well. So wherever you get your books, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, you can find Ruck Fit. Otherwise, I will include a link below. Today, I'm excited to dive into user-submitted questions. And if you have the book already, you can find frequently asked questions in chapter 2. Today, I am tackling questions that I have gotten on Instagram. So everything from what's best, a rucksack versus a weighted vest, specifically for ladies who might be well endowed. And then we're also going to talk about ways to increase pace. We're going to talk about footwear a little bit deeper than what I go into in the book. And I have a couple other questions sprinkled in there. So all of these questions came from Instagram users. Speaking of Instagram, around the same time I was collecting your questions, somebody popped up in my feed that I haven't seen for a while. So a little sidebar, but is Britney Spears okay? She showed up in my feed and things were crazy 6 months ago when I saw her in my feed. If you haven't checked her out, go through and, find Britney Spears on Instagram. It is wild. So that I won't comment too much more on it, but does anybody know, is this girl okay? Because I think we need to check on her. Unfortunately, she has her comments shut off. I can only imagine the gold mines that would be there, but yeah. Anyways, Britney Spears aside, let's get into some AMA questions. Before I do that, I just want to maybe pause here. And I'm going to be sharing things like products today. I do want to just maybe start with talking about creators in general. So myself or other creators that are out there, resources like this are free to you, but oftentimes there's a cost on the back end. So for example, I'm paying for podcasting software. I have my email newsletter software, and all of that is almost like a collective mortgage payment a month. Not to mention my health insurance premium since I have my own business. But that aside, I just want to say that if you have creators out there, whether it's me or somebody else, maybe you're exposed to a new brand, for example, or a specific product, how much it means when you do shop through our links. So we obviously don't have a salary. So every little bit counts. And while, again, this might be free to you, there is a cost to me. So do me a solid. If you find something today that you find really valuable, there are a ton of ways to support, again, creators like myself. You can shop through the links in my show notes. And this goes for other creators too. If you have people that you really, really enjoy what they're putting out, give them a little love, shop through their links, and just when you show that love, it really makes all the difference in the world. And if you're like me and you don't like to make big purchases on a tiny screen, consider bookmarking something, whether it's an Amazon link or the GORUCK links that I share below. That just really helps so much. Plus, it lets brands know that we're sending you their way, and that just helps create other opportunities. So you can fully support creators without purchasing a dime through them specifically. And I just want to say that to put out quality content, it takes a lot of time and energy, not to mention the systems that I just talked about, which can get very costly. And what's important to me too, especially with this podcast, is I could easily click a button and have ads run. But as I know, as a fellow podcast listener, and as you know, that is super, super annoying. So you might hear me sprinkle in, little soapboxes here and there, like this one, for example, on supporting your favorite creators, but I just can't emphasize that enough. How it's no extra cost to you, but by simply shopping through a link, that can make a world of difference, especially in a really noisy online world where sometimes it feels like we're putting podcasts or posts out there and it's just crickets and, we got the algorithm fighting against us. So this really helps us show loyalty to the brands that we're working with. Me in particular, I am very, very picky about the brands that I choose to work with. For example, I have been emailing back and forth with a potential new partner. And what's really important to me is that long-term relationship. I don't want to just go after who's got the biggest commissions and, sure, that is nice. But I know that listeners and viewers like yourself, that gets the ick real quick. So if I can just work on a few very carefully selected brands, that means more to me than, whatever shows up in my bank account. So support your favorite creators, whether that is me or somebody else, and you can do that for free without even spending a dime with them. Okay, now that I've gotten my ads out of the way, let's get into our first question. And this comes from Missy from Instagram. And she is asking, what is the best rucking gear for ladies, specifically with a bigger chest? And before I answer that question specifically, I want to talk a little bit about the differences between a ruck and a weight vest. So a ruck is going to be a backpack. 100% of that weight is on your back. So ruck is short for rucksack, or think backpack. So more of that formation. Where you'll see something like a weighted vest, a lot of times that weight is evenly distributed throughout the front and the back. So a ruck, you have all of the weight along your spine on your back. A weighted vest is going to be more evenly distributed on the front and back. And when we look at weighted vests, there's a couple different configurations. A lot of the ones that I see for women have like almost sand in them. They look more like backpack straps. They might have a little bit more thickness or sand or weight throughout, kind of between the shoulder blades. And then I see more of the male versions or, other weighted vest versions where it's more like a Kevlar vest. It's going over and fully covering your front and your back. And then there's plates that slip inside and out of that. In short, we kind of have like a male-ish vest. That's great, I would say, for other women who maybe aren't well endowed. And then there's more of the ladies version, which has more of an open front on it. More of that weight is carried in the shoulders. And when we're comparing the two, I will say, full disclosure, that I have them all. I have a weight vest and I have my rucks, and I like them for different reasons. So I'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons. I'm also going to link my blog post below where I have more photos of comparisons of me in a weighted vest versus a ruck, for example. And then I do have a bulleted list of pros and cons. So I'll speak through those today. But if you want a nice recap, I will link that in the show notes below. Okay, so we've got a ruck and we've got a weighted vest. Starting with the vest, one thing that's really important to consider is that these come in a fixed weight, meaning you're going to get a vest that's 8, 12, 15, 20 pounds. If it's the one, like the more lady version, the one where the sand is throughout the shoulder straps. Now, when you're getting the more kind of Kevlar style where you have the actual pockets to put weight plates, those do offer a little bit more flexibility like a rucksack. So I just like to disclose that personally, I do prefer a rucksack for beginners. One, because you get more posture benefits with that since most of the weight, or I should say all of the weight, is on the back. And then it is a lot easier to scale up. So if you're new to rucking and you're just starting out, you might find that you buy an 8-pound vest and pretty soon you're wanting to scale up to 10, 12, or 15 pounds. Now you have to go out and buy a whole new vest if you don't have the style that has the pockets. So with that in mind, weighted vests come oftentimes in fixed weights, and that might end up needing more vests down the road. I will say a weighted vest, because it has weight in the front and back, it can be a little bit better for older folks who might struggle with balance. So versus having a ruck where you have all of the weight on your back, you're kind of leaning into it, you get more posture and core strength benefits. But in some cases, I think a weighted vest can be really helpful, especially if again, struggle with maybe balance or coordination. It can feel a little bit more stable. And personally, I would say a weighted vest, I feel like I don't have as great posture because that weight is pulling down on my shoulders, like kind of pulling down and squishing my spine. I do prefer the Ruck for the scalability and because of those posture benefits. So a couple key distinguishing factors, because if you're beginning to ruck and again, scaling up really quickly, a Ruck can be helpful since you're just able to swap those weight plates out versus a weighted vest. You might find yourself, purchasing a new one, very, very shortly. A couple other considerations with the vest. So if we're talking full body style, where it's more of that Kevlar version, with the vest, it can trap heat more so than a rucksack. So a rucksack, you're going to have nothing covering your chest. So if you are rucking or using a weighted vest in hot or humid climates, then I would push you towards a ruck again, just because that heat dissipation is a lot better. And then you don't have that weight sitting over your chest. If you prefer a full body, that can be a really great option if you're just wanting to add extra weight to body weight movement. So maybe it's squats, or maybe you're doing some circuit training. This is where I love a weighted vest, where you can just throw it on. You have that extra resistance without the ruck. And I will say, and you'll see this in Ruck Fit if you have it, you can use your ruck more easily for resistance training as kind of that free weight or weight training buddy, versus a weighted vest is something you're probably going to have to wear. It's going to be really awkward if you try to use that to weight train. However, a ruck is a little bit more sturdy in that sense. So if you're looking to really do 100% of your workouts, including that strength training at home, then I would certainly opt for a ruck instead. So to summarize that a bit further, when it comes to a weighted vest, I think this is a great option if you're just throwing it on for extra resistance. Or, for example, I like to keep it by my walking pad so it's nice and low profile. And here in Minnesota in the winter, we don't get outside as much. So I keep my ruck by the door and I grab that for my outside rucks. And then when I'm just doing extra steps on my walking pad, I love to grab my weighted vest. Again, that's a nice quick option. It can be good for folks with balance, or if you're just wearing it around the house while you do household chores, that can be really helpful. Versus a ruck is going to offer you more scalability. It's going to be a little bit more sturdy, especially if you're using your pack for strength training exercises as well. Now, getting into Missy's specific question, what is the best rucking gear for ladies with a bigger chest? And I would 100% say, hands down, a ruck. Again, the weighted vest, you might have some of that weight up front, but if you have a bigger chest, I would say 100% go with a ruck. And that is going to allow you more room for the girls. And when you're looking at a specific rucksack, looking for one that has an adjustable sternum or shoulder strap. So for example, with all of my rucks that I have with GORUCK, they have little loops on the shoulder straps, and you can adjust those sternum straps. It's not really fun. I will say, if you use a needle nose pliers, just because the cordage is so tough and durable, it can be really tough to get that shoulder strap. Maybe if you're moving it up or moving it down, take your time, get a needle nose pliers, put some good music on. It might take you 5 or 10 minutes to adjust it, but once you get it in the spot that you need it, it's not going anywhere. And I will say also, with that in mind, testing a ruck with weight in it. So you might find that the chest strap may be great, and then all of a sudden you put a weight plate in your pack, and now the strap is fighting over whether it's going to go up or below the boobs, and that can be very uncomfortable. So I unfortunately can't sympathize with you, Missy, but I will say, even for women of all chest sizes, or even men for that matter, testing your ruck with weight in it, putting that chest strap where it be most comfortable. So you are going above the chest, but then below the collarbone. Sometimes I see a lot of people wearing their chest strap super, super high, and it just looks really uncomfortable. So you don't want it to choke you, but you also don't want it to be so far down where it's by your nipple line or something. And now, again, you're kind of fighting, are things going up? Are things going down? So adjusting that strap, again, it might take you a little bit of time to do it initially, but once you get it in the spot, it will stay there forever. I shared the differences between a rucksack and a weighted vest. And one honorable mention that I didn't bring up yet is a ruck plate carrier. So if you're looking for a minimalist option similar to a weight vest, but you want the benefits of a ruck, like posture or easily being able to swap out those plates, a ruck plate carrier is one of my favorite entry-level rucking options, especially for newbies. So my ruck plate carrier, this is what I'll use, especially in the summer if I'm just walking around the block. It is very scalable. Again, you can swap those weight plates out. You get the benefits of the ruck. It does have a shoulder strap as well. The one limitation is that if you're really scaling up weight and you can see yourself rucking heavier, then I would recommend a ruck specifically with a hip belt. So I'll walk you through my scenarios where I use a weighted vest, a ruck plate carrier, and a rucksack to help give you a little bit of clarity because, again, I think there's benefits to each. It's just finding what essentially works for you. For me, I love using a weighted vest for walking on my walking pad. It's something that I'm wearing in the house. When I'm just going for a quick, short, maybe lighter ruck, I love something like a ruck plate carrier. It doesn't have an extra compartment like a ruck, so that might be one limitation if you're looking to maybe go out for a longer ruck or a hike. It's nice to have that compartment. And that's where I really love my ruck. This is what I use most often, especially for longer, heavier rucks. And that is for a couple of reasons. One, I've got the storage capacity. I can throw in, an extra coat. I can throw in snacks. I have my water bottle, all of that fun stuff. And it has a hip belt. So if you have something like a GORUCK rucksack, a lot of times they have the capability to add a hip belt. Not all of them come with a hip belt, but I will say that this was a game changer last summer when I really started to scale up my weight. I was using a ruck and my ruck plate carrier, but then when I transitioned to a ruck with a hip belt, that really helped me get more comfortable under load, and I was easily able to add 5 or 10, sometimes 15 pounds right off the bat just by having that hip belt. So that essentially rides on your hips. It's almost like a seat belt, but it does help transfer that load to bigger muscle groups like your legs and your glutes versus having all of that tension on your shoulders. So I love, love, love a rucksack with a hip belt with that. One last consideration on the ruck plate carrier. This is the option between a weighted vest and a ruck. Again, no storage capacity, but some people love them and some people hate them. And I'll give you some tips to see what category you might fall in. And for me personally, again, I love my ruck plate carrier. I am about 5'3". I use the standard size. If you're shopping through GORUCK, or again, my links below, you'll notice a standard and then you'll also notice a long. And I would highly recommend the long for taller people. Maybe if you're over, say, 5'9", 5'10", or if you're thicker in the chest area. So for example, my husband, he tends to be a little bit like bigger and thicker throughout the chest and shoulders and back. Certainly go for the long version because that's going to give you a little bit more room. If you are a pretty big guy on top, you're probably going to prefer a ruck versus a ruck plate carrier because they can feel a little bit more restriction and they might especially kind of cut into your traps a little bit more, especially if, again, you're a little bit bigger on the backside. So just keep that in mind. There's 2 different sizes, a standard and a long. They are going to accommodate different weight plates. So we're not really talking about weight plates today. You can find a little bit more about that in the book, but just keep in mind, whatever you buy, whether it's a ruck or it's a ruck plate carrier, make sure that you are finding the right size weight plates to fit those options. So there you go, Missy. I hope that helps you find your option. We talked about the differences between a ruck and a weighted vest and a ruck plate carrier. You've got some options if you're well endowed, or even if you're not well endowed. Hopefully, if you're thinking about rucking and not sure where to get started, this will help point you in the right direction. I did link some of my favorites below as well. So I mentioned the ruck plate carrier. From GORUCK specifically, if you're looking for the weighted vest option, they have the Spy Ruck. They have all kinds of cute colors. And I was actually fortunate enough to test this. I went last summer to the GORUCK, the first ever Ruck and Flow retreat in Costa Rica. And I essentially met up with 20 amazing, wonderful strangers. And now we are all bonded for life. But during that jungle experience, we were able to test the Spy Rucks, and it was in true G.I. Jane fashion. We were out in the rain on the beach, like throwing around sandbags with our Spy Rucks on, and it was absolutely amazing. So I will say that I got to test one of the prototypes. I absolutely loved it compared to other weighted vests that I've gotten off of, say, Amazon, for example. A couple things really stuck out about the Spy Ruck from GORUCK. And when I say Spy Ruck, I should be specific that this is a weighted vest specifically made for women. And two things that really stuck out about this. So this could be an option, again, if you are bigger or larger chested, is that the chest strap on this weighted vest moves up and down. So it slides essentially up and down. So if you are bigger chested, looking to go the weighted vest option, highly recommend checking out the Spy Ruck. And I will say that it didn't stink. Like, this is kind of, I'm weird with smells. And especially when you're pulling things like right out of the box, like things can be funky. Or if you think of a ruck or a weighted vest, like it's, if you're doing it right, you're getting really sweaty. And you're going to build up some, a nice crust of salt after a while. And something like the Spy Ruck, they were very thoughtful about what they used on the outside and the inside. And it really goes to show, because I will say that as sweaty as I've gotten and all of the jungle muck and mud that we went through, my Spy Ruck does not stink. And I have yet to clean a rucksack, which is probably really bad to say. But maybe I'll get the pressure washer out this summer and do it. But, so far so good. Question number 2 comes from Steve from Texas. And Steve, thank you so much for this question, because I love it. And Steve is wondering, what is the best way to increase pace? And personally, this is an area where I really struggle too. I will say in the book, I share a lot of strategies on how to increase pace and distance and include training plans. But when we're talking about pace specifically, man, like this can be something that feels really, really difficult. So not only is it more challenging to walk under load, but now maybe you're trying to beat a time, for example. And I just want to take a step back and say that I'm a big proponent of either or when it comes to running or rucking. I don't recommend. I'm going to trademark that. I don't recommend running with a ruck or a weighted vest on. You really stray away from the benefits of rucking, being that it's low impact. Why put yourself at risk for injury? My personal stance is to either ruck or run, don't do both. Now, when we're talking about pace, or what is even a good pace, let's talk about a couple different benchmarks. So for beginners, if you can get your mile under 20 minutes, that's an excellent first benchmark. And that might seem like a stretch. I feel like some days I feel really slow with a ruck on, and then some days I feel really fast. So I would say for beginners, if you can get that ruck under 20 minutes, that's a great first goal. If you're looking on the other end of the spectrum for something more advanced or the Army standard, then we're looking at a 15-minute mile. So benchmark number 1 is maybe a 20-minute mile. If you're really looking to advance things and hit that Army standard, then we're looking at a 15-minute mile. So when we're talking about increasing pace in general, if you're in a 15 to 20-minute mile, I feel like that is a pretty good pace, and you're certainly going to recognize the difference. I feel like for me personally, I could probably struggle to run a mile in under 15 minutes. So yeah. But I will say too, with the Army standard in mind, this is also under a heavier load. So the typical Army standard, so thinking about getting ready for like Ranger camp, for example, soldiers are expected to ruck with a 35-pound dry weight. This includes no other equipment really, or some of the extras like water or food, or again, if you're sweating, going through mud and muck. This is a 35-pound dry weight at a 15-minute mile. And that is essentially torture on earth. So there you go in terms of benchmarks. Now, when we talk about form too, this is where it really gets important, because when you're really pushing that stride, it's going to increase that potential or risk for injury. So you really want to keep form top of mind. When you're rucking, you want to think about taking short, strong steps. Try and avoid taking these really long steps. That's going to put more strain on your joints. Instead, think about picking up the pace and doing shorter, strong strides. So you're really kind of stepping off quickly. You're pushing through your heels, squeezing those butt cheeks. One thing that I think is sometimes underestimated is the power of just pumping your arms. So I've done a couple tests where I'm just kind of rucking at my usual pace. And then when I think about ramping up the speed, when you're thinking about just pumping those arms, that can really, really help. So before you even step off, that's maybe walk through some of the steps to cue good posture. So before I'm even taking my first step, I'm thinking about, okay, I've got my ruck on. I'm taking my shoulder blades. I'm pretending that I'm plugging them into my back pocket. So think about tucking your shoulder blades into the back pocket of your jeans or your pants. That's going to help set your shoulders. When we move down to your core, think about absorbing a light punch to the stomach. So before we even step off, we're cueing those shoulders back and down. You're thinking about tightening your core like you're going to absorb a soft punch to the stomach. And now with that first step, think about pushing through your heel, you're squeezing that butt cheek, and you're taking these short, strong strides. And I'll give you a few tips here in a minute, thinking about pacing in terms of step and beats per minute. It's also important to consider that you can't go fast the full time. So one way that I really like to play with speed is to do intervals. And if you're looking for another great resource, when I was doing my research for this episode, I stumbled across a few people recommending Gritty Soldier on YouTube, and he has a couple shorts talking about ruck repeats. So you're essentially pushing that pace for a distance or a time. So for example, you're doing a faster interval for maybe a half mile or 1 full minute, and then you're going off for a half mile or a minute, kind of back to your natural pace. So you're swapping back and forth between these intervals of faster and slower, and that can really help test your endurance. And with that, I would maybe keep an open mind on what's holding you back. So in these intervals, do you feel like it's your posture that's holding you back? You can go through that kind of 3-step process we just talked about. If you feel like your posture starts to really slip, or do you feel like it's your endurance? Do you feel like you're really huffing and puffing, like your lungs aren't, able to keep up, your heart rate feels really high? That might help tease out where your time is best spent. So if it's on posture, you're going to have to be really mindful. If you feel like it's endurance, then you might benefit from other exercises like running or cycling. Wherever you can build up that cardiovascular base is really going to help your ultimate ruck times. When you're thinking about training frequency or how you're going to incorporate these speed intervals or specific speed days with your rucks, I would say maybe at least 1 day a week. Maybe that looks like 1 or 2 days a week. You're incorporating something like these intervals and testing your time. You don't know if you're progressing if you don't know what your time is. So certainly be tracking your rucks. There are all kinds of apps. I don't have a ton, of experience in this area, but from what I've seen from other ruckers share, there are apps like Ruckwell or Strava where it's actually taking each mile and breaking it down. I can't remember exactly if Ruckwell will do this, but I believe I've seen people share with Strava where it shows mile 1, for example, is 17 minutes and 20 seconds. Mile 2 is 18 minutes. So knowing where you start can really, really help. Or if you have a specific distance that you like to ruck, say maybe you have a loop. For me, it's a back and down. We go to the stop sign and back, and that's about 1.1 miles. So I know if I do that, that's about my mile time. So if you're not using an app to track, maybe you're just looking at the time from step off till the time that you get back, and you're trying to increase, or I should say decrease that time every time that you're repeating that. And again, you can't ruck heavy or hard every single day, so it's important to incorporate recovery into your training. In the book, I mentioned 3 different variables that you can do to ramp up the intensity of your rucks. Today, we're talking about speed and pace, and only increasing one thing at a time. So if you're really going to be playing with speed, I would encourage you to maybe scale back on weight until you can get to that specific speed goal, and then layer in more weight. So it might mean, again, that you're scaling back weight to help increase that speed, and then you can always bring that weight back in over time. I would say if you're really focused on speed, that would be my personal strategy, is going a little bit lighter, focusing on speed, specifically speed intervals once or twice a week, and then layering again that weight back in, especially if you're training for an event that's coming up. If you have a timeline, I do have 8-week, both 5K and 10K plans in the book. And then I also have a half marathon or 25K plan, which I'm thinking I might be starting later this summer. If anybody is interested in joining me, I saw a couple of marches that I'm considering. So if you're in the central Minnesota area, let me know, send me a message, and maybe we can do a little training together. A few other things to help with pace, specifically thinking about other types of training. So I mentioned how just general cardiovascular exercise can help build that base, which then can increase your pace. But certainly not skipping leg day. You want to keep up that leg strength, and also incorporating things like power movements, maybe 1 day a week. So things like box jumps, plyometric exercises, where you have quick power speed movements. That is also going to eventually help increase your ruck time. Another tip is to ruck with people who are faster than you. And I can specifically remember walking a couple of summers ago with one of my neighbors. She's about a foot taller than me, which doesn't really take much. But I will say, when we're thinking about pace, kind of sidebar again, is us shorties, we have to get a lot more steps in. So we might have some advantage when it comes to center of gravity, but I would say that we really have to increase that pace and that tempo because we're getting a less per stride. But in this scenario, I was rucking. My neighbor was not. She's about a foot taller than me. And I think she did most of the talking because I was just huffing and puffing the whole time. So I will say it can be a really great distraction when you are rucking with people who are faster than you. And again, it might involve scaling that weight back and building it back up, but certainly finding that group camaraderie can be a really good way to train. And then we get some of that social fitness as well, which is one of the things I really love about rucking. And my last tip on how to increase your ruck pace is thinking about music. This can be a really powerful tool, especially if you are listening to music that has a higher beat per minute. So I did a little Googling, and with the help of ChatGPT, I have a few songs for you. And what we're aiming for here is roughly maybe around 120 beats per minute, and trying to match that beat with each step. So to give you some ideas of songs, Don't Stop Believing by Journey is one. And when I first listened to this song and thinking like, this is 120 beats per minute, think of, again, really stepping really quickly. Billie Jean by Michael Jackson was another one. Poker Face, Lady Gaga. So that one to me emanates more faster, 120 beat per minute pace. Uptown Funk by Bruno Mars, and I actually did find a Spotify playlist. So if you use Spotify, there is a specific Spotify-built playlist that is 125 BPM mix, and that has songs like Black Eyed Peas, I'm a Bee. So I'm a bee, I'm a bee, I'm a bee. You can think like that's a pretty quick pace. Please don't judge me by my singing skills. But that is just a few songs. Loading up that playlist or going to that specific Spotify list. I'll maybe link that below in the show notes just so you've got it. But those can be some really great ways if you're trying to match your step with the beat per minute. And again, maybe you're rotating that and trying to do it for a full song. The next time, maybe you're taking a break and kind of pulling back a little bit, and then maybe the next song. So this would be a fun way to do intervals too if you're incorporating more music. So if you find music that is that 120 beats per minute, make a mix, use somebody else's playlist. This can be a really great way without thinking too hard to help increase that pace and that speed. But again, we don't want to increase pace without sacrificing posture. So being mindful of all of those things on your ruck. So thank you, Steve, for submitting this question. It was a really fun one to dive into, and I hope this helps give you some ideas on how to get that rucking pace down. Before we get into footwear, I have some questions from Linda from Michigan, and she had a couple questions about my own personal rucking journey. So her first one is, before I started rucking, did I hike, walk, run? I loved hiking. I enjoyed walking, but I felt like it wasn't enough. This is one reason why I really love rucking, is because I felt like as a perfectionist type A'er, like high achiever, walking, it felt not like a waste of time, but it felt like I could be using that time better and maximizing that time and optimizing and getting more performance out of it. So this is, again, why I love rucking, because it lets me get more for each step. So I enjoyed walking, but I would say I didn't do it as much as I maybe should have or wanted to, because I felt like it wasn't enough. But I do love hiking. This is one thing that my husband and I just treasure, is our backpacking trips on the North Shore of Minnesota. We're carrying everything on our back. We're going up the Superior Hiking Trail, and I have just some of my favorite, most fondest memories there. So I always like to say that the North Shore, that is my happy place. And a big piece of that is because I discovered the Superior Hiking Trail, and one day my goal is to hike all 316 miles, or I can't remember the exact number, but that would be one of my lifetime achievement goals, is to hike all 300 plus miles of the Superior Hiking Trail. I will say I was not a runner though, so I enjoyed walking, loved hiking, not a runner. This girl's a rucker through and through. I will probably never run again unless I am absolutely forced to. It feels awkward to me. It hurts my hip. I am not built for running. Maybe that's just a narrative I tell myself, but I guess I don't really care. I just have never really enjoyed running at all. I think there was actually maybe a really short stint of time, now that I'm thinking about it, where I forced myself to run, but this is probably when I was going through maybe an undiagnosed eating disorder as well. So I was restricting very heavily, and my motivation to run was not a healthy one. So I will say I have maybe a history of running because I just wanted that runner's body. But let's be honest, I am not a runner built type body. I am kind of short and stout, and I've just accepted that fact. So hopefully that helps give you a little bit more personal background. And again, I love, love, love rucking, so much so that I wrote a book about it. Linda's also wondering, how far did I ruck in the beginning versus now? What is my average pace? And I will say I'm pretty slow. Again, I'm short, so I feel like I kind of have that stacked against me a little bit. But I will say I haven't been as focused on pace lately, because I've really been focusing on ramping up weight. So again, we don't want to change all the variables at once. For me, I've been trying to ramp that weight up. But now after today's discussion and doing a little research, I'm really motivated to work on pace. I think this is just an insecurity of mine on how slow I am. So I like to do things that I'm good at. So when I am working on a specific weakness, it can feel a little uncomfy, to say the least. But I would say my average pace on a good day, maybe it is like, with lightweight, maybe it's 16 to 17 minutes. That's on a really good day, I would say. And honestly, it's been a long time since I've actually checked my pace, but I would say on average, I'm probably closer to that 20 minutes. So I'm just under maybe that beginner threshold, partly due to, maybe me being short and carry a heavier load. So I would say it ranges from 17 to 20 minutes. If there's a lot of elevation, then that might increase the time a little bit more as well. But I will report back once I have more data and once I am ready to retest that time. In terms of distance, when I first started rucking, I was doing a mile, maybe 2 miles tops when I first started. And I would say some days I still do that. I try to make rucking work with my life, not the other way around. Now, I did mention I might be training for something later this year, which is going to be a lot more distance than I have ever rucked. So I feel like I certainly have some imposter syndrome in that sense, that I feel like I've never rucked a marathon, for example. So I can draw from my experience, but I feel like my experience compared to a lot of other more seasoned ruckers who have been doing this for over a decade, it's difficult not to compare sometimes. So I will say my longest ruck on record was, I believe it was actually in Costa Rica for the Ruck and Flow event. I think one day we did a jungle ruck that was close to 8 miles, which felt like it was all uphill, and I was just sweating buckets. So I would say that that's probably my longest ruck on record, was hiking in Costa Rica in 8 miles with, again, a bunch of wonderful, strangers who turned into lifelong friends. So no longer strangers, but that was an amazing, amazing experience. Ultimately, my distance really varies from day to day. I try to fit in what I can. Maybe it's a mile here, a couple miles there. But when we ruck with our ruck club, we have a minimum of a 5K or 3.1 miles. So we've been known to circle the parking lot to hit that 3-mile mark. But when I'm rucking in a group, I feel like that's where I really like to push distance, because I get really overwhelmed or distracted if I have a daunting time or distance to do all by myself. So I love having distractions and really exercising that social fitness component for those longer rucks. With that said, let's dive into our last question. And this one's on footwear, and it comes from Brennan from Instagram. And Brennan asks, I was wondering if you could offer some recommendations for footwear, boots versus sneakers, and if there's a particular style or brand you recommend. Quick background, I've been rucking for a couple of years and usually wear Bates police boots. They've been really comfortable for me, especially since I have bunion issues. I originally bought them for range use, but they've worked well for rucking too. The issue is that I recently joined a group that mixes rucking with running and other hybrid drills, and the boots are tough to run in. I tried Brooks running shoes, but my feet start hurting on longer rucks, especially when we're on pavement. I'm hoping to find a good middle ground, something supportive enough for longer rucks, but still comfortable to run in. I always struggle to make recommendations for footwear because I feel like this is so personal. And Brennan, in your instance, I feel like you're trying to check a lot of boxes with your shoe. You want to ruck, you want to train, you need something sturdy, but then something that's not got too much squish. And I will say that I can empathize with you on having a shoe, like for example, a traditional running or walking shoe. They just don't work for me either because I feel like they don't have enough support. I personally prefer something like a hiking boot, or more recently, over the past couple of years, I've discovered the GORUCK McCalls. And these are shoes that are specifically made for rucking. They have what's called a drop. So your heel's going to sit a little bit higher than your toes, which feels a little bit awkward at first, but once you get used to it, it makes such a difference, because I found that I had a lot of foot pain, specifically on the outsides of my feet. And this really helped give me that good arch support. Plus it had a nice wide toe box. So if you're, thinking about doing drills or rucking, you've got a nice amount of room for your toes, which can help prevent blisters. With that in mind, I'm a little concerned that maybe the McCalls might be a little bit too sturdy on the bottom. So they're great, especially if you're on terrain that's rugged, because they're nice and thick. But I can see where they might not have enough give. And thinking about your question, I did a little bit of research. Again, I mentioned Gritty Soldier earlier. He had a couple boot recommendations, or I should say one in particular, and that was Garmont, I believe. And it looks very much like an army boot, but this one looked like it had more of the flexibility and the sturdiness. But I will say it's probably going to be very terrain dependent. So I feel like I don't have a lot of answers to your questions. I feel like I have a few suggestions. It might take some trial and error. I also do want to say, don't underestimate socks, because thinking about thickness, how thick or thin a sock is, that can make a big difference in how your shoe fits. And if you're going back and forth between these drills, you're probably getting sweaty feet. Looking for something like a wool sock is really going to help pull that moisture away from your feet as well, especially if you're rucking in maybe some muddy or mucky territory. Don't underestimate the power of socks to help prevent some of those blisters or some of that other wear. So I would suggest something that's not the Brooks or the walking shoe like you've already kind of ruled out. The McCalls would be maybe my first option to try. If that is too sturdy, then maybe something like the other boots, and I will find that link and put those below. But these are going to be, maybe for some people not the most aesthetically pleasing, unless you want to be, wearing something like an army boot. But with that in mind, I will say GORUCK makes a great variety of rucking boots as well. From experience, I can only speak for the McCalls, but I will say a lot of people have also liked the Mac V's, and there are a couple different options there. So whether it's a boot, whether it's more of a shoe, I think ultimately it's finding something that works for you. So as cheesy as that is. And then specifically thinking about bunions, one shoe I want to throw out there that I feel like came up and surprised me when I was looking and researching for the book and looking at footwear was Hoka's. I have never personally owned a pair of Hoka's. I know my mother-in-law absolutely loves them. I don't know that she's rucked with them, but I will say that that could be something to look into. But again, looking for something that has got a nice sturdy sole, something that doesn't have too much squish, something where you're not getting a lot of friction. Thinking about just the variety of movements that you're doing, something that laces up even a little bit higher where you don't have the opportunity for like that heel to pull out of the back of your shoe. I would think that maybe a boot might work a little bit better for you, but I am, kind of at a loss here for specific recommendations because I think ultimately it's going to take some trial and error. So Brennan, I'm sorry if I just didn't help you jump off the fence one way or the other. But again, thinking about shoes, not just shoes, but also socks as well is going to be really, really important. A big thank you to everyone who submitted questions today. Missy, Steve, Linda, Brennan, thank you so much. If you have any questions related to rucking, nutrition, CGM, I have a link below in the show notes. You can submit your AMA questions or you can hop over on Instagram. You can follow me and shoot me a DM there. I love doing segments like this where I'm really able to dive into what you want versus me pulling things out of thin air and just talking about what I want. So surely there's a place for that, but I love digging in. There's no question that's off limits. The more controversial, the better. So if there's a question that you've been chewing on and you want me to do a little bit of a deep dive in podcast form, surely submit that below. For links to any of the products recommended today, including my book, Ruck Fit, Build Strength and Endurance by Walking with Weight, you can find those links in the show notes. And remember, when you're shopping through those links, it's at no extra cost to you. It's totally free, but it really helps me out to help provide quality content. And that goes for more than just me. So if you have creators that are out there doing stuff that you absolutely love, show them a little love, shop through their links. It really doesn't take much effort, but it can mean the world to baby creators and one-woman shows like me. With that, thank you so much for listening. And if you want to hear more from me on a weekly basis, make sure you sign up for my Win the Week email newsletter. Every Monday morning, I'm sending out tips from nutrition, fitness, rucking, CGM, recipes, whatever is on my heart for the week. You can find that link below in the show notes. Otherwise, stay tuned and I will catch you on the next episode.